Tzav. V'yidaber Shem Moshe Lemor. Tzav is Arvis born of Lemor. You should command Aaron and his sons, saying, Zos Torah Sa'olah. This is the law which pertains to the burnt offering. Hi ha'olah. This is the olah. Al mokta al mizbeach kol halaylo. On the beer, meaning on the pile of wood, on the mizbeach kol halaylo, ara boker. It must be there on the mizbeach the whole night until morning. Ve'eshu mizbeach tukad bo. And the fire of the mizbeach should burn through it. Take a look at Rashi. Here the Torah uses an unusual word, tzav, command. Give the charge. Could have said, tell. Daber or emor el Aaron. And like it says, emor el kohanim, say to the kohanim. Tzav is a charge. So Rashi cites Chazal, the Midrash. A tzav el loshen zirus. Miadum doros. It's an expression of to do it with alacrity. Don't delay. Don't procrastinate. Now the question is, if something has special value, a person doesn't procrastinate. You only procrastinate and don't to attend things immediately because we have reason to be laid back. So evidently there's reason over here that we have to give that special charge to urge them. There's an urgency to attend to the olah, to make sure it burns all night on the mizbeach. Reb Shimon says, especially here, more than ever, the Torah has to show the urgency, because over there there's a question of loss of money. What does that mean? There's loss of money. There's a cost factor. Now, what are we speaking about? We're speaking about the burnt offering. Every other korban, the Kohanim have a share in the korban. Whatever they receive, if it's kochim kalim, it's the lesser level of consecration. They receive the chos v'shok, the thigh and the breast of the animal. Other animals, chatos, osham, sin offering, the guilt offering, they receive all the meat is exclusively for the Kohanim. A non-Kohen is not permitted to eat it. Only the Kohanim eat it. So there's a benefit. So the korban they're officiating, participating in, there's a benefit for the Kohanim to be involved in the service. What about he have to be up all night? The olah, the only thing the Kohanim receive from the olah is the hide of the olah. They receive the hides, but the actual meat of the animal is burnt. That's why it's called the burnt offering. So they have no financial benefit, and not only that, they have to be up all night attending to make sure that it's burnt. Because the mitzvah is, if it's not burnt during the day, they have to be up all night making sure it's burnt. Therefore, as a result of that, since there's, on a certain level, subconsciously, a person says, what is my value? Therefore, there's a reason for him to be laid back. The Torah expresses it with an urgency. No, you must give them the charge that they must do it. That's the chsor and kiss. Discuss this in a moment. Zos Torah Sa'olah. What does it mean? This is the law which pertains to the olah. That the burning of the fats and the limbs, it's valid, although it's nighttime. Let's stop for a moment. Now, as I mentioned, whenever the Torah speaks about lechaper, to atone, what is the essence of the korban which brings about atonement? It's the blood service. It's sprinkling the blood on the mizbeach, on the altar. That is the essence of the kapara. The eating of the korban by the kohanim, or even by the owner who eats the korban, if it's a shlomim, or it's a thanks offering, that only makes the atonement more complete. But the core atonement is the sprinkling of the blood, as I mentioned, because the korban, the animal's in place of the person, and since the Torah tells us, ki dam hu nefesh, what is the life source of a human being? That is the blood of any living creature. So the blood it's giving your life. You're giving your life, you see yourself that your life has been taken to atone, and Hashem is taking the animal in your place for atonement. The remains of the animal that you burn, that only brings it to a more complete level of atonement. The law is, what happens if you slaughter the animal, you receive the blood, this is all during the daytime period, you're about to sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach, and all of a sudden you realize, shkia comes, sundown. That korban is not valid. You cannot sprinkle the blood after sundown. A korban could only be brought during the daytime, because the Torah tells us, biyom zivcho, only during the day is the ritual of the korban, biyom during the day and not at nighttime. But yet, the burning of the limbs and the fats, which brings it to a more complete level of kapara, that could be done at nighttime. But the essence of the korban, which is korban lashem, which is midas harachmim, that's only during the daytime. Once nighttime comes, you can no longer do the blood ritual. Therefore, the only thing you do at nighttime is burning the limbs and the fats, which is not the essence of the kapara of the korban itself. Now, we find that what does day represents and what does nighttime represent? The daytime period, the nighttime period. Daytime always represents the midas harachmim. We say is mizmor shir Chanukas Bais l'Shabbos. We say lahagid baboker chastecho. Lahagid, David Amel says lahagid baboker chastecho. We speak about Hashem's chesed baboker in the daytime, in the morning. Ve'emunoscha baleilos. Nighttime is emunah. Emunah means it's belief. We don't understand many things. It's midas hadin. Nighttime is the midas hadin. For instance, the Gemara tells us, Lo yetzi od michidi balayla. The nighttime, a person should not go out by himself at nighttime. We're speaking in a location that's uninhabited. Why? So it's explained by the commentators. The Ramchal speaks at length of this, that nighttime, there has to be a balance in existence between good and evil. The nether forces in existence which represent the negative side of existence. That's the counterbalance to good. Now, each one has to be given its equal time. The daytime period, which is a time of human productivity, where man goes out and he's able to be productive, that is the time for the positive forces. Because if the nether forces would be there, man would be subject to harm. So Hashem keeps them at bay and only allows them to come out only at nighttime. Because nighttime, that's not man's time of productivity. Nighttime is midas hadin. I'll give you an example. This is Minig Ashkenaz. Minig Ashkenaz in the Shemon Esrei, during the daytime, the last bracha is Sim Shalom. Sim Shalom. The nighttime bracha in the Amidah, let's say Mincha, or let's say by Nusach Svard, by Ma'ariv, by Arvis, it's Shalom Rov. Right? Now, how do we refer to, in Sim Shalom, how do we refer to Hashem? Borchenu Avinu. We speak to Hashem, the relationship is Borchenu Avinu. At nighttime, we refer to Hashem as Melech, Melech Adon. Nighttime Hashem is the king who's the master. It's a different level of relationship. It's a much more formal relationship. During the daytime, it's Borchenu Avinu Kulonu Or Panecha. That's Borchenu Avinu. Nighttime, Melech Adon, Hashalom. He's the king who's the master of peace. It's a much more formal relationship. The whole concept of korban, as we mentioned, is midas harachmim. That we're able to be atoned when we fail, to bring the korban, instead of us being punished, and this reinstates us, that's the ultimate midas harachmim. That can only be done during the daytime. Therefore, as a result of that, the blood ritual, which is the core kapara of the korban, it's biyom zivcho, can only be done during the daytime. However, the burning of the fats in the limbs, which only bring the kapara to its total completion, that finishes the kapara, and even if you don't bring it, you're atoned. Therefore, that can be done even at nighttime. We say, Kohanim ochlim bailim iskaprim. The Kohanim, when they eat the korban, their eating of the korban, that's part of the kapara. The Kohen is able to eat the korban at nighttime. And kochi kadoshim, chatos oshim, where was it eaten? It was eaten in the sanctuary. It was not eaten outside of the sanctuary. Just as the blood is inside the sanctuary, the Kohen eating the chatos, the oshim, which are atonement offerings, that was inside the Azorah, inside the sanctuary. It was taken out of the sanctuary, it was invalidated. As the blood, if it's taken outside of the sanctuary, it's invalidated, the blood. It's called psul yotzei. You know, the Gemara tells us in Brochos that we find that the three tefillos that we say every day, Shachris, Mincha, Bairav, Arvis, correspond to the korbanos. Shachris corresponds to Tomid Shel Shachar. That's the first communal offering. Mincha corresponds to the afternoon communal offering. And what does Arvis correspond to? Arvis corresponds to the Ivorim and Pedorim, the fats and limbs that were burnt at nighttime. That's what it corresponds to. What happens if there were no limbs or fats to burn at nighttime? Everything was able to be done during the daytime. So the Mizbeach at night is vacant. Nothing happens. We rule halacha, Arvis is Rishus. Shachris is obligatory. Mincha is obligatory. Relative to Shachris and Mincha, Arvis is Rishus. It's non-obligatory. So Tosas and Brochus explains what it means, that in certain situations, if there's a conflict between Arvis and a mitzvah, the mitzvah takes precedence over Arvis. But Shachris and Mincha, which are compulsory, they have to be brought no matter what. It has to be said because it corresponds to the communal offering of the morning and the afternoon. That's chova. It's obligatory. Now, because since Arvis corresponds to Evorim Pedorim, if you have no Evorim Pedorim and bring, that's really more, it's circumstantial. Circumstantially, you bring the fats and the limbs if you have them to be sacrificed. You're permitted even at nighttime, but one doesn't have to do it at nighttime. You're able to burn them even during the daytime period. So Arvis is really dependent on the circumstance. Shachris and Mincha depend on circumstance. Those communal offerings have to be brought twice a day, in the morning and in the afternoon. As a result of that, Shachris and Mincha achova, they're obligatory, they're compulsory, they have to be said no matter what. Even if there's a conflict, you say the Shachris and the Mincha. Arvis, if there's a mitzvah which conflicts with the Arvis, the mitzvah takes precedence over the Arvis. Okay, but it's based on this, what we're speaking about right now. What the pasuk says, "Hiya Olah, Lamari Saro Ve'av Sanirva Shlo Hipsum Bakodesh." Okay. Now it says, "Eisha Mizbech Tukad Bo." The fire of the Mizbech must burn it. The Gemara tells us that on the Mizbeach, there was a spiritual fire, there was a heavenly fire that came down and burnt and consumed the korban. And there was a mitzvah to add to that fire to bring human fire. And therefore, a number of times a day, you had to put wood on the Mizbeach, that it should be spiritual fire and physical fire. And the mitzvah is you must bring that wood. You must burn wood to have human fire. And we'll see a little further, which we're not going to discuss this morning, you're not permitted to extinguish that fire. The Torah says in Pasuk Hey, Ve'ishal Mizbeach tukad bo, the fire of the Mizbeach will burn it, lo sichbeh. You're not permitted to extinguish it. And therefore, bir aleh kohen eitzim baboker baboker. Every morning, the kohen must put wood on the Mizbeach. Now, there's a question which the Ramban asks. Noach made a teva, made an ark. What was the ark? What was its dimension? It's 300 amos wide, long. It was 30 wide, 30 high, and 60 wide. Now, how many species went into the teva? 2 of every non-kosher species, 7 of every kosher species, domesticated, undomesticated, birds, insects, reptiles. Everything went into that teva. Is it possible that such a small location is able to contain all that went into it? It's impossible. But yet the Torah says, make that ark to meet certain dimensions. The Ramban asks, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it was a miracle. That whatever went into the teva was able to be contained in there, in the ark, was miraculous. If you'd have 1,000 football fields, it would be not enough to contain whatever went in there. And yet, in the small location, which God says must be minimally that size, you have all this life goes in there. And that's besides the food that had to be stored there, within that location. Hashem could have performed a miracle that suspended animation, everything could have just been suspended. Or he could have had something which is the size of a matchbox, everything goes in there. Why did it have to meet this standard of, which seems to be that they were able to go in within a reasonable level of understanding that at least something could go in there? So the Ramban explains that whenever Hashem performs a miracle, the miracle itself is not obvious to the point where it's not understandable. And it's blatantly clear that a miracle is taking place. Why? Because if a person would be exposed to miracles continuously, and you would continuously see the hand of Hashem, this would infringe on one's free choice. The only reason why a person has choice is because there's always a way to see it differently, in a different context than it's actually happening. I mean, how many people stop to think about how is it possible that the ark was able to contain whatever it did contain? How many people even stop to think that? To ask the question. And even to ask the question, there's the question, are you taken aback? Is it amazing? It's not amazing. Because it's within a context that it has a capacity to contain. But if it would have no capacity whatsoever to contain, then you'd be taken aback and you'd be touched by that fact that a miracle is taking place. So whenever Hashem performs a miracle, it's always in a way that it could be seen, not necessarily it's blatantly a miracle. Because if miracles would be blatantly clear to people, this would actually minimize a person's free choice. So the Chinuch therefore says, if let's say you would extinguish the fire on the Mizbeach, which fire could you extinguish? You could only extinguish the human fire. The heavenly fire you couldn't extinguish. So if you would extinguish the human fire, what would you see? You would see the miracle. Hashem doesn't want you to see the miracle. Because if you'd see the miracle, this would be an infringement on your free choice. Therefore, you must add wood to the Mizbeach continuously, that there should be intermingling between the human fire and the spiritual fire. And therefore, the Torah says, the fire in the Mizbeach has to be continually fueled by the Kohanim putting wood on the Mizbeach, and therefore there's a negative commandment of Lo Sichbeh that you're not permitted to extinguish the fire, because the only fire which could be extinguished is only the human fire, not the spiritual fire.